Well, I just got done watching The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, the second in the often criticized Hobbit trilogy. Um, the main source of criticism being that it should have been just one or two great movies and not just three movies with a lot of padding. Now, I do not share that opinion, but I suppose I should preface this review by giving my thoughts on the first one and the series as a whole. I love the Lord of the Rings movies. They are some of my favorite movies. I love them. I really love the source material. I think J.R.R. Tolkien is the benchmark for fantasy writing. Um, and the first Hobbit movie, I I did really like, and I actually have the extended edition of it, which I actually think improves it. Oddly enough, I mean, a lot of the criticisms around that had to do with the fact that it was overly long. Um, but the extended edition, I think, is better than the theatrical version. Same with the Lord of the Rings movies. Um, but uh, but the thing with the first one, the first Hobbit movie, An Unexpected Journey, is that it had a lot of fan service. I mean, it had a lot of stuff that if I were editing it down for a more general audience, I could have easily chopped some stuff out, and I understood why some people were bored with it. Um, like if I was not a fan, I would have snipped several portions off out of that movie entirely. I would have chopped out the stone giant battle. Um, Great scene, great spectacle, but not really that essential to the overall story. I mean, you could have just had them go into the cave. Um, I mean, that sequence really was kind of pointless. The White Council scene I would have condensed a bit. Um, I would have kind of tried to condense the Sauron subplot, but I was a little more conflicted about that because it is a form of foreshadowing into the sequel. Um, the whole thing at Bilbo's house I would have snipped, but that being said, as a fan, I just really loved these scenes. I just love the fact that and that's what gets me about Peter Jackson's take on the Lord of the Rings, is the attention to detail. When you watch Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings, and by extension his Hobbit movies, you are coming as close to Middle Earth as you can possibly get, aside from just stepping into the pages. You are stepping into a beautifully realized vision of Middle Earth, and that is very true here. The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, is a darker movie. It starts out basically where the first one left off. Bilbo Baggins, played once again with immense charm by Martin Freeman. Pardon me. He and the dwarves are on the run from Azog the Defiler and this hunting party of orcs. Um, and they take refuge in the house of Beorn, who is a skin changer. He has the ability to turn into a bear. And over the course of the movie, they get into a lot of other misadventures. They finally reach the Lonely Mountain, and they learn that they may not have been as prepared to fight the dragon as they might have thought they were. Um, so yeah, like I said, this is a darker movie, and one thing that I think will win general audiences over is that this one, with all of these set up out of the way in the first one, gets right down to it. It gets right down to the journey. It gets right down to the quest. Um, it doesn't let you get lost. I mean, it still informs you of the primary goal. But but it just flows a lot more. There were parts in the first one where I even admitted this, even though I really liked the first one. I admitted that the characters were really in no hurry. They were just kind of casually strolling along on their quest. So so with this one, since they are essentially being chased, they are being chased. Not essentially. They are in much more of a hurry. And not only that, they are on a time crunch. They have to get to the mountain before the last light of Durin's day, and there's not a whole lot of time left, and they have to cross more dangerous obstacles. They are not in friendly territory anymore. They are not in the Shire anymore. So basically, what I am saying is that this movie is much more of a thrill ride than the first one. This movie, and there is plenty of moments. There are plenty of moments for character. There are plenty of moments for story, but again, since they got all the exposition and setup out of the way in the first one, it's. I mean, there's a lot more room for dodging new obstacles. And another thing I really liked about this is the fact that, again, I keep saying that's unlike the first one. Um, there are actually a lot of new locales to visit, and there were some in the first one, but a lot of the first one was just kind of revisiting places we'd already seen in Lord of the Rings, like the Shire, Rivendell, the Troll Shaws. Uh, they visited a different part of the Misty Mountains, I think, than the Fellowship did, but I digress. Here we visit really new and gorgeously realized locations like Mirkwood Forest. We visit Lake Town. We finally get into the Lonely Mountain. We briefly saw the Lonely Mountain in the prologue of An Unexpected Journey, but here we actually get an interesting comparison in the prologue of the Unexpected Journey. It was essentially this flourishing dwarf kingdom. I mean, you had all these different dwarves working. It was practically glowing. It was so prosperous. And here it's just really dead. It honestly looks kind of like the mines of Moria, from Fellowship of the Ring, because all they find are corpses. It's completely empty. Some of the walls are starting to come down. It's just a really sad looking dwarf kingdom that actually makes for a very foreboding location, and that sets the stage for one of the film's many frightening moments. This movie is scarier than the first one. I mean, there are genuinely creepy moments in this movie. The spiders, and I originally thought that the spiders were going to be a bit of a retread of Shelob, the giant spider from Return of the King. Not true. The spiders here, they are smaller than Shelob, but there are a lot more of them, and they get the jump on the dwarves. They're not as noisy. They I mean, Bilbo and the dwarves basically get stranded in this very thick, very claustrophobic, web-covered part of the forest. The spiders do not make many sounds except for when Bilbo puts the ring on. I don't know how exactly this works, but it's an interesting concept where the spiders only talk like they did in the book when Bilbo puts the ring on. And and basically the spiders are creepy. I mean, they jump at the camera. The spiders in this movie are, I honestly think they're a little too intense for younger viewers. They are so they just jump out at you. I'm not just saying that because the movie's in 3D. I didn't see it in 3D, at least not yet. I might go see it again. Um, but oh my god, these spiders! I can't imagine an arachnophobe going to see this. I think an arachnophobe will actually have to get up and leave during that scene, um, because the because just the way the scene is lit, again, the claustrophobic feel of it, that the fact that these spiders got the jump on the dwarves. I mean, you don't even see a fight. You just see all the dwarves in webs. Bilbo's like, "Can you hear me?" Because he's up in the trees as a lookout at this point. He's like, "Can you hear me? I see the lonely mountain. I know where to go." And you just see him and the dwarves being dragged away in these webs. Really effective scene. And speaking of scary scenes, Smaug, the dragon in the title. Oh my God, he is everything. He is everything he should have been and more. He's not quite as huge as I thought he was going to be, but he's about as big as they could possibly make him. Aside, if they did not want him to kind of struggle to crawl through the caverns, because if they made him much bigger, he wouldn't have been able to fit in the dwarf kingdom. I mean, he wouldn't have been able to get around. So basically, it's the scene from the book where Bilbo is talking to Smaug. Smaug in this movie is voiced and mocapped by Benedict Cumberbatch. Really good job with the motion capture. I mean, right up there with Andy Serkis. Not quite up there with Andy Serkis, because Andy Serkis. But I mean, just the way that Smaug is so vain and yet so sharp. I mean, he is actually a very scary character because of how perceptive he is. He starts to mess with Bilbo's head. Bilbo is trying to stall for time because he's trying to get the Arkenstone. Because that's his job. He as a burglar has been sent into Smaug's lair to get the Arkenstone, which is supposed to cement Thorin's right to rule and serve as kind of this rallying relic for the dwarf legions. So at the same time as Bilbo is kind of stalling for time and trying to get Smaug to open up a little about why he's there, what his quarrel with the dwarves is, does he have any weak spots, and as Bilbo is kind of taunting him, saying I don't believe you are as great as all the tales say, Smaug at the same time is asking the questions about him and forming pretty frighteningly valid impressions of him. He's saying, like, you were only a means to an end. And this kind of plants the seed of doubt in Bilbo's mind. And speaking of, I'll get to this in a second, but speaking of doubt in Bilbo's mind, there is a much more visible effect that the ring is having on him than I would have expected. But I will get to that in a second. Smaug, he is so. It's honestly a very creepy scene because it's set up very nicely. I mean, Bilbo just kind of walking through the caverns, and there's no music. There are barely any sounds. Bilbo is just walking into complete silence, and he comes across this vast, empty, or not empty, but this vast dwarf kingdom with his gold stacked up. And he doesn't know where the dragon is, and the dragon does not immediately burst out and attack him. The dragon kind of wakes up slowly. It opens its eyes, and it slowly rises out of the gold. And as soon as you hear him start talking, you can immediately sense that the wheels are turning in his head. He is about to play a game of wits with Bilbo. It's kind of like the scene with Gollum at the end of the first movie. But Smaug is a lot smarter than Gollum. Like I said, he kind of starts to figure Bilbo out. Bilbo does not have the ring on at all. I mean, he kind of puts it on at the beginning, but basically what happens is Smaug's senses prove too much for him. He eventually just takes it off, um, because Smaug is literally coming this close to finding him, even with the ring on. So he just decides, screw it. I'm not going to try and hide from this guy because he will find me. So he basically kind of butters Smaug up. He's flattering him, and he tries to. And while Smaug is talking, he's kind of half chasing Bilbo. He's kind of walking around, displaying his hoard, his wealth, and kind of what he can do as just this really menacing force of nature. And Bilbo's just trying to get out of the way. He's just getting knocked around. He's hiding. And Smaug is always there to find him. So really chilling scene, and that eventually builds to an all-out confrontation slash chase through the dwarf kingdom of Erebor, with when the dwarves eventually go in and see if Bilbo's okay, see how everything's going, see what the noises are that they're hearing outside. The sequence does go on for a little too long, I think. I think it could have been trimmed for a bit. But it doesn't. It never gets boring. It never. It never kind of detracts from the overall movie. It just goes on for a little bit too long. But with that said, Smaug is truly a benchmark creation in computer animation in much the same way as Gollum was. He is big, he is scary, thanks in no small part to the stellar performance by Cumberbatch, and the detail that they get on him. It apparently took a long time just to animate one scale on Smaug, and it shows. The hard work of the guys over at Weta Digital really shows. Really well done on the dragon. The dragon is everything you hope he will be and more. But enough about him. There are also the cast of characters is also expanded upon in this movie. You have Orlando Bloom is back as Legolas, so he's kind of a welcome familiar face. It's nice to see him again. It's nice to see him in his more rash younger days. He's more prejudiced against dwarves. He's distrustful. He's very loyal to his father. He doesn't really imagine venturing outside the borders, and that kind of leads into his relationship with Tauriel, the Evangeline Lilly character. And what a lot of fans might know, and what some general audiences do not know, is that Tauriel was not in any of the books. Legolas wasn't in the Hobbit book, but he was in the Lord of the Rings. Tauriel is not in any works of Tolkien. She's completely made up for the movie. I did not mind. I liked her character, actually. She added some humanity to the elves. She was a welcome new face. She was a strong female character. She wasn't in your face. She was just a very likable female elf, and a more and kind of a lower class elf. It was interesting to see a lower class elf, because everything we've seen up until now is the main elf characters we've seen up until now are all high elves. They are basically the equivalent of dukes or royalty in the kingdoms of men. But she is a Sylvan elf. And basically she and Legolas kind of go on this hunt. She wants to see outside the realms of she wants to see outside of the woodland realm, so she kind of follows the dwarves, partially because she kind of sees a kindred spirit in Keeley. She forms a relationship with Aidan Turner's character, Keeley, and and it's not, and this kind of leads into kind of a love triangle because Orlando Bloom's character Legolas, he kind of shows some affection for her, but at the same time she's kind of intrigued by Keeley and how he's not as brash and he's not as repulsive as some of the other dwarves. Um, and when I heard there was going to be a love triangle in this movie, I just kind of groaned. I was like, come on, really? Do we really need a love triangle in The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit? Do we really need this? But oddly enough, this I didn't mind either. I mean, a lot of stuff I thought I would not like in this movie, I I actually kind of did like. The relationship between her and Keeley is not like I said before with the whole Tauriel character. It is not in your face. It is not at the forefront. It feels genuine. It feels like these two characters would have. I don't want to say a physical attraction. Just they are intrigued by each other. They like talking to each other. They like being in each other's company, and when she shows up to heal him at the end, it feels right. I mean, it feels like something she would do without necessarily being a full-on romantic interest. Um, and by extension, the love triangle with Orlando Bloom does not feel in your face either. It feels unneeded, um, but or at least at this point, it might lead to something in the third movie. But it feels it just feels there. It doesn't feel like it's intruding on anything. Um, it doesn't feel like it's kind of dragging down the story. It doesn't feel like it's trying to come up with any kind of artificial drama like a lot of love triangles are nowadays. Um, like I did not care one inkling about the romance or the love triangle in the Hunger Games movies. I did not care one bit about the love triangle in the Twilight movies. I don't like love triangles. I I just think they're a very cheap plot device. But for some reason, this one worked for me. Maybe it's because I like the characters, and that's another thing I will compliment because the characters you really like go. You are really starting to like these characters, these dwarf characters. They are starting to become more distinct from each other. They are, and they were distinct in the first movie visually, but the thing with the first movie, it was the first time you saw 13 dwarves. I mean, by the second movie, you actually start to see what each of them can do, what each of them specialize in, what the personality of each of them are. They're a bit more fleshed out, as they should be, because if you don't care about these characters, then there's really then that would give you cause to get very bored during these adventure movies. But no, you really like these characters. You like how upbeat they are. You like the camaraderie that goes on between them, and I also liked how after the first movie, after Bilbo kind of cemented his place amongst the dwarves, after he proved his worth, Thorin and the others now treat him equally. They now treat him as an equal part of the company. They don't look down on him. They don't kind of go like, why are you even here? Where are you? Why are you all right? I mean, they like I said, Bilbo's place amongst the dwarves feels more secure this time around. He's not quite as out of his element. He seems to be. I don't want to say he's having the time of his life because he's obviously dodging danger with the other dwarves, but he feels much more like he should be there. It's kind of a two-way thing. Like they feel like he should be there, and he also feels like he fits a lot more than he did in the first one. Because the first one, a large part of it, he kind of felt like a misfit. He kind of felt like he shouldn't have gone out the door, and he kind of gradually got used to it. Here he is used to it from the beginning. He is kind of scouting for them. He is actually helping them solve problems. He is contributing to the group. He is, like I said, he just feels like a part of the group. And getting back to how the dwarves are more distinct this time around, Richard Armitage gets to shine a lot more as Thorin. His character feels deeper this time around because you actually do see him go through a believable arc, a compelling arc, about how his goal in the first one was basically to reclaim the home of his ancestors. He kind of reclaimed this dwarf kingdom. He kind of seek justice. Here he does still have that goal in mind, but at the same time, it's slowly being mixed, and at times confused with this underlying desire for wealth, this underlying desire to cement his place as king. There's this very subtle corruption that is going on in him, and I found that very interesting. And at the same time, there's a very visible corruption that within Bilbo that is going on with the ring, because especially towards the beginning, he's kind of reaching into his pocket and just kind of feeling the ring, seeing if it's still there. And what I actually liked when he fought the spiders, when he saved the dwarves from the spiders, is that at one point he drops the ring, and he's kind of searching around like, where is it? And one of the spiders, he sees it, but it's blocked by one of the spiders. The spider is about to get it, and Bilbo just unloads on the spider. He just repeatedly maims and stabs this spider, picks up the ring, and just says, "Mine." So I like that. That's a bit darker than the book, because in the book he's just kind of saving them from the spiders. A lot of this is given. A lot of the events and a lot of the characters are given more layers here than in the book, and that's not to say anything against the book, but the book was considerably more basic and considerably more. It was more of a lighthearted adventure. This kind of takes inspiration from that, but while at the same time trying to tie it in with the Lord of the Rings, but something that I think is handled much better here are the tie-ins to the growing evil of Sauron. The Sauron subplot here does not feel intrusive. It does not feel unwarranted, especially given the orcs running around. It does. It's just integrated into the story more so than the first one, because the first one, whenever the Sauron thing would pop up, I was like, okay, this seems kind of unrelated. But the thing is, it kind of contributes to, like I said, it contributes to the story, because Azog, the Manu Bennett's Kratos orc, is called back to Dol Guldur to command Sauron's forces, and he sends his son Bolg to continue the hunt. And Bolg kind of looks like Azog, except a bit more deformed. He kind of looks like a cross between Azog and the dermatologist nightmare goblins from movie 1. But yeah, I really loved this movie, and the visuals. My God, the visuals are just gorgeous, and that's a big part of why it was so rewarding to see new locales in this movie. Mirkwood Forest is creepy. It messes with their heads. They kind of insinuate that there's something in the air. There's something something very thick. There's something very foreboding in the air. That causes them to hallucinate. That causes them to just lose the path. Partially because of the air, and partially because everything has just become so gnarled and dark and confusing that they lose the path. It's not because they meant to lose it. It's not because they deliberately left the path. It's so hard to stay on the path because Mirkwood has become this very evil place. In fact, that's why it's now called Mirkwood. And the Elven Kingdom, run by Lee Pace as the Elven King Thranduil, Legolas's dad. Which I actually find it kind of funny that he's playing Orlando Bloom's dad, and Orlando Bloom is older than him. I digress. But his kingdom is, it's kind of reminiscent of Lothlorien in the Lord of the Rings, in that you can tell it's still this elf kingdom. There's this very big focus on trees and kind of building around the trees and living amongst the trees. But here, it feels a lot more closed off from the world. It feels darker. Just the lighting and the color scheme that they went with, it's like this kind of autumn going on. It's definitely it feels more dangerous, and it feels more uncomfortable than the Lothlorien woods did in the Fellowship of the Ring. The Fellowship of the Ring, Lothlorien woods actually felt, at best they felt friendly, and at worst they just felt slightly eerie, which was the point. But here, these elves are distrustful. They are closed off from the rest of the world, and as such, some of the rooms, especially the cells, feel very claustrophobic. They feel very, very foreboding, and I like that. I liked the fact that you got to see more of this world. And Lake Town, you finally get to see Lake Town, which in past adaptations has looked considerably nicer. Lake Town has kind of gone down the tube. At first I assumed that it was because of poor trade, maybe because they were living next to a dragon. But the movie kind of leans more towards the greed of the master of Lake Town, who is played comedically by Stephen Fry. It's kind of funny just how vain this guy is. This guy is almost as vain as Smaug, because there's this huge statue of the guy in the center of town, and in this guy's room, all the rest of the buildings in Lake Town are just this kind of run down, rotting wood housing, while the master of Lake Town, at what I can only assume to be City Hall or his center of town mansion, he has these carpets. He has a big room-sized painting of himself next to his bed. This is a guy who clearly really loves himself, and he has this smarmy little assistant who gathers rumors and gathers intelligence for him. It's a little self-indulgent, how slimy this character is, and how blatantly smarmy he is, and snarky as he is. The only reason that he allows Thorin and company to proceed to the Lonely Mountain, and the only reason that he actually gives them supplies and armor and everything is because Thorin basically says, think of all the wealth in the mountain. All will share in the wealth, and you will be able to rebuild Lake Town. You will be rich. And the master of Lake Town is kind of thinking, oh yeah, I can get behind that. So Bard is really one of the only sane people in Lake Town. Bard is played by Luke Evans, who is basically this family man. You really like this character in the comparatively short time you get to know him. I mean, you really buy him as this fairly formidable warrior in his own right, but at the same time, really caring about the welfare of his people. He's this very likable everyman character. Um, while at the same time, he feels great shame because the men failed to stop Smaug before he reached Erebor. His ancestor Girion um, fired two black arrows at Smaug, and while they hit, they did not kill him. And Bard kind of feels shamed. He's chastised over that by the Master of Lake Town. Um, and as fans of the book will know, this will eventually lead to a form of personal redemption when he does succeed in killing Smaug in the third movie. And that reminds me, the ending will piss a lot of people off just because of its because it is a cliffhanger. It is this very frustrating cliffhanger. Just as, oh my god, I just sat there when the movie ended. When the movie ended, I was just like, what's next? There's got to be more. We got to wait until next year? Oh. Oh. But yeah, the acting is also better. I mean, I probably touched on this when I was talking about the characters. Like I said, Martin Freeman is still very good as Bilbo, even though he's not given as much to do as I would like. I mean, he does. When I said he feels like a member of the company, it feels like he is beneath Thorin Oakenshield as far as the protagonist of the story goes. I mean, he does just kind of follow orders. He helps. I mean, and you still do feel like it is his movie for much of it. But sometimes the spotlight is on Thorin and the other characters so much that you just, some people just might go, well, where's Bilbo? I mean, isn't he supposed to be the hero? But to that end, I can kind of see where that argument would come from, but at the same time, I was kind of thinking to myself, the world is a lot bigger than one Hobbit, and as long as he does not completely drop out of the story, I would be somewhat forgiving. And like I said, he does get a lot of screen time. He does still manage to be a very likable and charismatic character. Martin Freeman is still fantastic. Still the perfect choice for young Bilbo, in my opinion. Let's see. Richard Armitage is better as Thorin this time around. I mean, like I said, he's given more to work with in terms of Thorin's ongoing corruption into a greedy ruler, and how people are kind of calling him on that, like you don't look well, you are not yourself, you're becoming overcome by greed. Your grandfather became overcome by greed, and look what happened to him. And Richard Armitage is very compelling as he plays Thorin, as he's kind of working through that. He's kind of you can see that he is struggling with himself as to what he is really looking for. But at the same time, he is managing to conceal that beneath this mask of determination. I'm sorry to sound so metaphorical, but yeah, the performance by Richard Armitage is very good, and I don't think many people will have a problem with him this time around, because there were some people that were saying the first time that he's just kind of not Viggo Mortensen. Viggo Mortensen plays my favorite character in the trilogy. He plays my favorite character in the series. He plays Aragorn. And to that extent, I can kind of see where the comparisons came from, because he does kind of look like him, except melded into a dwarf. But I never really got them confused, and and while they are both characters who come from a royal line, there is one key difference: is that Aragorn does not want to be king, while Thorin wants desperately to be king. So there is that one big difference between them, and yeah, I don't think nearly as many people will be griping this time around, because they do manage to differentiate Thorin from Aragorn in a way that many audiences will find him compelling in his own unique way. Ken Stoat is still very likable as Balin. The white-haired dwarf. He's kind of this. He's this very nice, wise dwarf. He's much more interested in talking rather than fighting, and he kind of understands what Thorin is going through. He's still very likable. Graham McTavish as Dwalin. He's still very. You still believe that he is a force to be reckoned with. You still really buy into his loyalty for Thorin, and the other dwarves are each good in their own way, but and even though that more of them get to shine this time around, there is still that occasional instance where a few of them might kind of drift into the background as just members of the crowd, members of the company. Like Ori, the youngest one, the one with the Mo Howard, the one with the Mo Howard haircut. He doesn't really get a whole lot to do. I'm trying to think if he had any lines. I mean, he probably did have some lines, but I can't remember any of them. Let's see. Some of the other dwarves like Dory and Ori. Those are probably the dwarves that got the least definition in the first one, and they get even less definition here, sadly. But what can you do? You can't. It's 13 characters, and it's not like you completely don't know who these people are. You still kind of get the general gist of their personality. Is that it's just that the movie goes deeper into the personality of some than it does with others. For example, it goes deeper into the personalities and the backstory of Thorin and Balin, Dwalin, and Keely than it does for someone like Ori, Nori, or Dory, or Biffer. But Ian McKellen is still very good as Gandalf. He kind of goes off on his own with Sylvester McCoy as Radagast the Brown. Christopher Lee is not in this one. Neither is Hugo Weaving or Cate Blanchett. But they couldn't find room for the White Council, I guess. Gandalf and Radagast basically go on this little excursion to further examine the growing evil power in Dol Guldur. They go to the tomb of the Nazgul in the High Fells and find it empty. Radagast, I don't think as many people will find to be annoying in this one. Some people found him to be annoying in the first one. I didn't. I actually found him to be a lot of fun. I actually like that they did a lot to differentiate him from Gandalf and Saruman, because if you have three wizards like that, all three of them sage like very very stoic British wizards, there is the risk that you could confuse them. Radagast, I liked the fact that he was kind of more in tune with nature. He had bird crap running down his face. He from the birds nesting in his hair. And he and Ian McKellen are still very good together because they had previously worked together on stage. And yeah, he and Ian McKellen are still very good in this. They are. In fact, Radagast kind of drops out of the plot. He shows up briefly, and then Gandalf sends him to Galadriel to get reinforcements, I guess. And Gandalf kind of goes off on his own to examine Dol Guldur, and that's when bad things happen. I really liked this movie. New Zealand is still the definitive Middle Earth, and there are still plenty of gorgeous exterior shots, and even the stuff that's added in digitally, like the wide exterior shots of Lake Town, and some of the Elf Kingdom, some of the Woodland Realm, Thranduil's Kingdom. It doesn't strike you as fake. I mean, the effects in this movie are just gorgeous. If there were as many CGI orcs running around this time around, I did not notice. I mean, it seems like they had more time to kind of fine-tune the motion capture effects on characters like Azog and Bolg. Manu Bennett doesn't get quite as much to do this time around as he did the first time. He motion captures Azog, but he's still fine. And Azog almost looks like he's really there. He looks better this time around, and it's not that he looked bad in the first one, but to a certain extent, I could tell, okay, this is a digital character. This is a motion capture character, but the effects in this movie are just so good, and the effects were really good in the first movie too. The effects are good in all these movies, and ordinarily I would have a problem with excessive amounts of CGI, especially if it's done poorly, and especially if it's done for no reason. But some of the creatures in these movies, like the trolls and the Goblin King, I could understand why they did motion capture. And even with that said, it's not like in the Star Wars prequels where the effects honestly have not aged well. In the Star Wars prequels, I mean, a lot of the alien effects look kind of fake. I mean, they lack texture. They look a little too shiny. There's real attention to detail in these effects. I mentioned earlier how they worked tirelessly on every scale on Smaug's body, and it shows. And it showed in the goblins from the first movie. I didn't like the fact that there were so many CG goblins in the first movie, but at the same time, it was very good CGI. And it's very good CGI here. I mean, the bear was mostly kept in shadow. It was mostly seen in far away shots. You didn't really get a lot of it close up. And it's not like the whole movie is CGI. I mean, there are still plenty of practical sets, like Beorn's house is a set. It was kind of funny how even Gandalf looks kind of small in comparison to Beorn, because Beorn's just this, for lack of a better word, he's just this great big bear of a man. So naturally his house would be scaled up to where everyone else, even Gandalf, just looks minuscule in comparison. So his set was very good. A lot of the sets for the close-up shots of Lake Town, like when you only see a certain part of Lake Town when the characters are fighting, it looks good. I mean, it's kind of like the Batman Arkham games where there's a commendable attention to detail in just how disgusting it looks, because Lake Town, like I said, is very run down. It's this very sad, pathetic looking village. I mean, it's kind of like I like the design of this place. It's kind of like Charles Dickens crossed with Venice, Italy. And just make it set during some type of depression, some type of economic downfall. So, and that leads me to the one of the biggest things I liked about this movie is that, a lot like the first movie, there is a real sense of further expanding this world. But I think it's handled better here because like I said, you do see a lot of new locales, and it's not just the same ones you saw before. But a lot of the time it is integrated into the story. It's not like the characters stop every 5 minutes to admire the scenery, like some people claim they did in the first one. I thought it was developing. I liked it in the first one. I liked seeing more of these places in the first one, but that could somewhat be the fan in me talking. But whenever they went to these places in this one, whenever they went to Lake Town, whenever they went to Dol Guldur, whenever they went to the Elven Kingdom, whenever they went to Erebor, every gorgeous location, every beautifully filmed location that they go to feels completely necessary. It's there for just long enough, and then they leave. It's, I mean, it. No place in the movie overstays its welcome. You don't get tired of seeing one place. You don't feel like, come on, pick it up. And in some cases, I actually don't think. I actually wish there was a bit more. Like I said, I wish there had been a bit more Bilbo. I wish there had been. I think they could have gone a little further with the Mirkwood bits. I think they could have spent a bit more time kind of mentally decaying in Mirkwood. And yeah, it's but that'll likely be saved for the extended edition, which will hopefully fulfill some of the quarrels I have with this. But with that said, the quarrels are very, very few. I really love this movie, and I honestly think that if you are a fan or a general audience member, you will really, really like this movie. You will have a blast in the movie theater. Tolkien fans, I think, will be satisfied. Just with the really breathtaking realization of a lot of these places from the book, how a lot of the changes make sense. Like there are some changes in the movie, but instead of feeling forced, they make sense and serve to deepen the motivations of some of the characters, like Thranduil. It's been a while since I read the book, but Thranduil in the book, I think his main reasoning for keeping the dwarves in his dungeon was purely or mostly out of distrust. Here, it kind of is, but at the same time, you really get the sense that he is kind of justified in not wanting to condone their quest in not wanting to risk waking the dragon, because it reveals that he has been wounded by this type of creature before. I mean, his half of his face is gone. So changes like that really, really serve to deepen these characters, and I'm just repeating myself at this point. Go see this movie. You owe it to yourself, whether you are a fan of action movies, whether you are a fan of the fantasy genre, or whether you are a fan of Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. You will get your money's worth. Go see this movie. It was worth every penny. I want to see it again. I really want to see this movie again because I just loved it that much. Without thinking, this is definitely going to end up on my best movies of the year. It's already ended up on Time Magazine's best movies of the year. But yeah, it's better than the first one. And like I said, I really like the first one, and by extension, I love the extended edition of the first one. Not as much as any of the Lord of the Rings movies, and that's something I probably should say, is that maybe it's just my nostalgia talking, maybe it's not. But as much as I like this movie, I did not think it was as good as any of the Lord of the Rings movies, because I can count the problems with the Lord of the Rings movies on one hand. In my opinion, those are the problems I had with the Lord of the Rings movies. That many problems. but yeah, this movie is a blast. You will never be bored. You and it's not like it's and fans will not feel like they bastardized Tolkien's vision. They will not feel betrayed. They will just see this as just another worthy entry in Peter Jackson's very entertaining take on Tolkien's mythology. And yeah, I think it further justifies my claim that Lord of the Rings is better than Game of Thrones.